Good morning. It is Tuesday, September 9th, and I'm going to continue work on the tiles for the Death Wizard's board. I'm going to start by adding some gravel in between all these rocks, or yeah, I guess rocks, tiles, whatever they are. I'm going to do that by getting some wood glue and mixing it with a bit of water, and then I'm just going to spread it all around here, and then put the gravel down. I just have this thing of gravel here, like I don't know what it is, but that stuff, ground texture, and then just wipe off the top of these tiles since they'll have a little bit of glue on them and probably some texture. Wipe that off, and then of course it'll stay down in the recesses between the rocks. And then it'll probably be time to move on to painting, but we'll see what we get up to today. But definitely going to start with that and go from there. Alrighty, so I've got my wood glue, got my water, got a little basin to mix them in, got just an old ratty paintbrush, and then I've got my, I guess, paint. No, what is this thing called? Paint knife or something? No, I don't know what this is called. The official name for it. I use it for scraping the prints off my plate, my 3D printer plate, and that's why I have this paper towel around the handle because sometimes I touch the handle with my gloves that have some leftover resin on them, and I don't really want to get that on my skin. So I'm just going to take some wood glue here. Actually, let me start with the water. Just going to pour a little bit of water in here. Should be good. And I don't really have an official mixture for wood glue and water. I guess I try to be like maybe 1-to-1 glue to water, maybe 2-to-1 glue to water. I don't know exactly. I just mix it around until it feels right, and then I go from there. All right, so I've got a pretty good mixture here. I also realized I needed to go find something to capture the excess gravel that I'm going to put down here. Don't want that just all over my table. So now what I'm going to do is just kind of put this in the cracks here. And of course it's going to get on the tiles as well, but that's okay. That's what the scraper is for. So I'm just going to go around everywhere here, making sure to get this glued down in the cracks and crevices. And you know, if there's a little bit of this gravel above or on top of the tiles, that's fine because it just will look like these tiles are sort of half buried in the dirt, which will be just fine. This doesn't have to be a perfectly maintained road. It's obviously not a perfectly built road based on the tile sizes. So I'll just do this. Hopefully I'll have enough material to do this all with. I don't have a ton of gravel, but I don't think it's going to take a whole lot. So if I have to, I'll go out and get some more. But just want to make sure to work the glue into all the recesses here. Spin this around. I'm also getting a little bit of glue on the edges here to get a little bit of a transition between the tiles and the rest of the board. And this is also easily, you know, you can come back and spot fix this if you missed a spot and no gravel gets in it or whatever. You can always come back and just add a little more glue and add some more texture. All right, almost done here. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm sure we'll have to come back and spot fix some of it, but for now that'll work. I'll just lay this down in here. Throw my paintbrush in the water because we don't want the glue to dry in those bristles. Then I'm just going to come in with my texture here. I'm actually going to, I think, rotate it a little bit like this, and then kind of go from the top here. Just going to do this. Good. Give it a little bit of a tap. And then I'll lay it flat and do this again just to make sure that it's gotten in all the recesses. Yeah, I probably should have just done this from the beginning. Just pour it all on top. So then give it a couple taps to get it down in the recesses. Pour the excess off. And then we'll take our scraper and just come down get a paper towel to wipe the excess off here. And you know, actually, now that I think about it, the paper towel may actually work better than the scraper. You just come down and wipe off the excess here. Alright, I think that looks pretty good. Of course, this will get painted, and so any of the little texture sitting on top of the board still will just, look like dirt laying on top of the tiles. No big deal. I may come back where you can see like here, it's a little, there's still a big recess there, so I may come back, put some more glue in there, put a little more texture, and just work it back and forth until I'm happy with the level of texture versus road. But yeah, that's basically the process. I'm going to do that with the rest of the tiles. And then once that's all dry, I'll either do the texture out here, or I may prime these and do the texture after. It'll depend on if I'm going to end up painting out here, or if I'll use ground cover that will be the color out here. We'll have to see. Either way, I'll be back once I am done with all these. Alrighty, so got all these tiles done. And now we're going to use some of this stuff. This wallboard joint compound, as it's called. And just going to use my putty knife again. Putty knife, that's the word. Nice brain. Figuring it out. I ended up not using this much for the tiles, actually. I found it easier, and I think they came out better than they did with the putty knife, to just use a paper towel and kind of rub off the excess. And it kind of pushes it down into the crevices anyway, so that worked out a lot better than this did. But I will use this to apply this stuff. I'm just going to apply a thin layer of it everywhere that isn't this, essentially. One for some texture that's cheap. I think this thing was like $7 or something, and this will last forever. But also to protect the foam for when I prime it. Most primer will melt insulation foam, so put a layer of this down on it to prevent that. So just going to come in and kind of spread it out, not being too careful with it. I also don't want it to be too flat. I do want there to be some texture, but I do have a trick for that. If it looks too much like drywall compound, essentially, when I'm done, then I do have a trick for giving it some texture. Just want to make sure that you're covering most of the blue here, or whatever color your foam happens to be. And then I'm just going to come in and go down to the edge of the road here, so that it has a nice natural sort of lead up to the road here. A transition zone, I guess you'd say. And any small areas that you don't completely cover will be fine. The foam might get melted a tiny bit from the primer, but it won't, with it just being a tiny little spot, it'll just look like some added texture on your board, and you'll be fine. Then I need to grab another paper towel. And first, this over here. First, I'm just going to wipe off the excess I don't want I don't want any along the edges here. This will mean I have to be careful when I prime. I'm just going to prime, straight down. If I prime at an angle like this, I'm going to hit this edge and melt it. I could do I could put putty on here or edge banding or all sorts of stuff to protect that edge. But this is this is a temporary campaign. This board doesn't need to last forever. So I'm just going to leave it like that, and I'll just prime straight ahead like this, and I should be absolutely fine. But then, this doesn't really look like earth, really. So I'm just going to take my paper towel that I wiped the excess off with and just come around and do this. And just make this look a little more varied and interesting. Kind of drag the paper towel in different directions so we get alternating shapes. We don't want it to be too... We don't want it to look like popcorn ceiling or something. That looks pretty good. And then, set that over there. Then I'm just going to take a little bit of the stuff that we were using for the grout in between the tiles here. And I'm just going to sprinkle some of it here, there, and everywhere on this. Not full coverage, as you can see, but just to break it up just a little bit so that we have variance in texture. And once I paint this, it'll be just fine. I put my drop cloth away, or drop cloth, or not really drop cloth in this case, but you get it. Tap off the excess, and then of course I'll do the other side, but there you can see that will certainly pass as dirt, and we've got a nice transition there up to the road. And once you prime this, do some dry brushing, paint the tiles, everything will look hunky-dory. The first part, doing the grout in the tiles, took me about an hour. This will probably take me a little more on all the tiles, maybe an hour and a half or so. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, then lay the board out, let it dry completely, at least a couple hours. This is a very thin layer of this stuff, but it still will need to dry, especially along here. It will need to dry for a couple hours. And then I will prime it. You don't want to prime when this stuff is wet, because if you get that layer of paint over it, then it will never dry, or at least take a very long time to dry. And it can mess up. You put a miniature in it, and then you got this stuff on your miniature, and that's terrible, and or someone else's miniature. So yeah, you just want to let this dry. Just be patient. Then give it a good prime. And I'll come back once it's all primed, and we'll get into some quick and easy painting techniques, not only for a project like this, but for terrain in general. Alrighty, so I got all my tiles finished up here, nice and primed, and I was originally then going to just make my own wash, essentially, with some different colored paints. But then I remembered in one of my auxiliary paint racks here, I have all these secret weapon washes. I suppose these will be backwards for you. Maybe. I don't know how cameras work. I have all these secret weapon washes that I haven't used in so long. I don't even know if this company's in business still, to be honest. But since they are already washes and I haven't used them in forever, I figure I'll give them a try. There's all sorts of different colors. So I'm just going to find myself a brown armor wash that might be brown. Baby poop. Sure. That's probably brown. Dark sepia. So yeah, I'm just going to grab some of those colors and slap them on here in a couple of different places. I'm going to use a dark wash on the stones, a lighter, but more brown wash on the dirt, and we'll see what we end up with. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. I'm just going to use a variety of browns. Got, like I said a second ago, I have dark sepia, armor wash, which I should make sure this isn't a metallic color, actually. I don't want my dirt being metallic-y. Yeah, I suppose I should have expected. I haven't used these in years, so they may be a little clogged. Okay. Doesn't look metallic-y. It also doesn't look very strong, so I'm going to mix up just a couple here and see what we get. It's also entirely possible that these will be completely dead and won't work as washes at all. Yeah, I think they might be separated, unfortunately. The pigment may have separated from the medium. It's been so long. Give it a little shake. Yeah. Oh well. I'll work on these another time and try to get them back up and running. Unfortunate, but this concrete one though, this one feels like it might still be intact. I'll just leave this brown in here. It's not a big deal. But this one shakes a little bit easier and feels like, yeah. So that feels like it may actually be still a wash. So I'm just going to get some water, mix that in, so we don't need it to be too thick. And then I'm just going to come in and I'll put this over the stones here. Just making sure to work it in to all the cracks and crevices. This might not quite be dark enough for what I want here, but we shall see. I am, of course, going to paint the stones also in probably a gray. So this may end up not being dark enough to give us some nice contrast against the gray of the stones. Yeah, I think that's looking a little bit light, so I'm going to just grab some black. This is Vallejo Game Color Black. I don't think it really matters, but and I'm just going to mix it in to this mixture I have here. Get some more water. Don't want it to be paint. We do want it to be wash still. So mix it up really well. Make sure it's thin enough. It's a little too thick right now. I don't know. It's kind of the consistency of like eggnog right now. And that's a little too thick for what we want. Add a little bit more water. We want sort of the consistency of milk rather than eggnog. That looks much better. Get our brush wet. Thin it out just a little bit more. And then come back in. Yeah, this is much better. We don't want it to run all over the place though, so we do want to keep it in the lines here. It can run on the table, that's fine, but we don't want it to run all over our what will be the dirt at the end here. Alright, that looks about good. Just get it into all the cracks and crevices here. And then we'll just let that dry. And then we'll obviously come back and paint the stones. And then do the wash on all this. But I'm going to do the rest of these now. I'll do all the black that I need on all of them. Then I'll rinse this cup out, come back and do all the brown. Alright, so I did all those. They're drying right now, and now I am going to do the brown. Basically the exact same process, but instead of on the tiles, it'll be on all the dirt. Alrighty, well, that is going to do it for this episode. Mostly because I am running out of storage space on this device. So I'm going to cut it off there. But, once you've seen one tile, you've seen all of them. It's also getting pretty late, so I'm going to stop for the night after I do the brown on the rest of these tiles. Then they can dry all night. They'll be nice and dry for tomorrow when I will paint I'm going to do some algae or like moss or whatever between the stones. Then I'm going to paint the rocks, and then probably do a little bit of ground cover on or not ground cover. We did ground cover. Foliage on in and around the brown areas. I have to keep in mind, of course, that depending on the orientation of these tiles, the buildings may have to sit on top of anything I put on the dirt, and so it all has to be low. I'm going to do some like low shrubs and stuff that the houses will just sit right over if they need to, and then when there isn't a house in that spot, you'll be able to see it. But thank you everybody for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I would encourage you to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you want to see the continuation of this project tomorrow, and I'll see you tomorrow.